Lace Crochet Pattern by McKinnon. Lace crochet mats linking loops and link to the past. Crochet mats were laid and displayed to decorate and protect chosen polished surfaces. Favoured objects, ornaments, dishes, photographs were arranged on mats to be well shown. These treasured mats were made before television watching was usual. My mother seemed to have made most of her mats after she was married, even though she did quite hard physical work, involving the milking of a cow by hand, chopping logs, gardening, looking after us children, and all the housework without electrical devices. Crochet is simply linking loops in different patterns using a special hook and yarn. All crochet starts with a loop. To make a circle, a row of chain loops are joined by a slip stitch. The pattern is continued by hooking the yarn in single, double, or treble times to create an intricate design of a round lacy mat. The rhythm to and fro, pulling loops in at a steady pace, was a calming and peaceful time. Treasured paper pattern instructions were followed carefully. My mother's mats are still used as the base for chosen objects in my home today, but not the ubiquitous tray cloth on a tray.
People call me Janet MacArthur, but I wish I had a floral name such as Flora McThistle. I am a lover of wild planting. My handbag always contains sharp secateurs. My feet are grounded at Starbank Park. I was a florist in the Marais, Paris before. I like to make gardens in miniature. Sometimes seeds slip through my fingers onto coastal scrubland. My best friend Stan, the gardener, is almost 90 years old and is almost blind. I am an avid collector of teapots. My name is Flora McThistle.
My Dad Was Born in Glasgow by Dave. My dad was born in Glasgow and died in England. The family moved to the home counties just 50 miles from London. We lived in a village where most of the people called my dad Jock, even and especially his friends in the 1960s. This wasn't during the war when quick-fire names came fast to the tongue, at a time of sudden disaster when you could be dead tomorrow. At first, I thought they've forgotten his name. But the years passed, and when I was old enough to leave home, I moved to London. One morning on the Underground, on the way to work, I began to think about my family, and it occurred to me, they called him Jock. How unimaginative of them.
The next station is Covent Garden.
Owl by Lannah. When I saw the owl ornament in the charity shop in Musselburgh, it reminded me of the one in my back garden. Over 30 years ago, I lived in a village in Northamptonshire and worked in a local hospital. Alf, in charge of front hall reception, made owls and sold them to staff at knockdown prices. I think he produced them using a rubberized mould and could churn them out in huge numbers if required. All the same, they were good-looking creatures, statuettes, the stone-grey colour of Greek statues, but less than a foot high. I bought one and took it home. When my daughter Nikki came home from school, she loved it on sight. We decided it must have a name. There were many alternatives, but in the end he became known as Wall. In A. A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, one of Christopher Robin's friends in the 100-acre wood is Owl. He's considered very wise because he was the only toy who could read and write. Outside his front door, he proudly displayed a notice saying W-O-L, Wall. We found a very good position for him in the back garden, and he was much admired. Some years later, we moved to West Wales. Nicky by then had gone to university. When the removal van left, my husband and I folded down the back seats of the car for all the last-minute items. We also packed essentials such as kettle, mugs, tea, 2 tabby cats named Ivy and Mistletoe, a tortoise called Billie Jean King, and Wall. Again, we found the owl a prime position in the garden. He survived blistering sun, wind and rain, snow and frost without any of his features eroding. His eyes, ears, feathers and claws were still distinct. We lived there for over 25 years until 3 years ago I moved to Market Street in Musselburgh. I was lucky enough to find a ground floor flat with a small garden at the back, just a few minutes' walk from my daughter and family. Of course, Wall came too. The garden is rather flat, with no obvious perch for the owl, so he stands on a decorative garden pot turned upside down. One day, I realised that Wall had gone, and I had no idea how long he'd been missing. My grandson Scott had been playing outside, so I had a look around the garden, but with no success. I felt incredibly sad. It seems silly to have such feelings for an inanimate object that only cost £1 years and years ago. But even so, I did feel quite upset. When Nicky called by, she also made a search but couldn't find him. My grandson was the main suspect, and the next time he visited, he gave me a shamefaced smile and produced Wall from deep behind a garden bench. So, Wall sits in his usual position. I looked again at the cute owl in the charity shop, but thought, no, I don't need another owl. I've got Wall.
My name is Jeff, and this poem is called The Roman Bridge. Ghosts cross by the Roman bridge. Who would have guessed they didn't want their feet wet? They're indifferent to sleet and freezing winds that flesh out midwinter's malevolence. Yet I've seen them glare hard as spite from the river's edge at water glinting in moonlight, stumble to their crossing point, line up, then politely pass over. Not our bridge, though, with its cement and stone shaped centuries after our ghosts were alive. With nothing stored in their eyes to mind where to walk on frost-sharp nights, they stride on air above my route. I see the soles of their feet from underneath, their gait betraying the sway of some wood and rope construction, long since splintered, frayed, washed to the ocean. They never notice me, though I'm tempted to call out, sometimes do. Nearby windows burst open, flooding abuse. If I had a pebble for every crazy thing you say, I'd make mountains from your blether. It's not my fault, I reply. It's a costly privilege, you'd agree, to speak to folk who aren't real.
On the day of her eye operation, I headed down the beach at sunrise with the piece of driftwood I had carved with protective runes the night before. I had misjudged the tide, and to reach the water I'd have to walk out further than I had before. I stopped halfway and stared back at the safety of the beach, where the crows were dancing in the wind. It seemed very far away. As I carried on walking out, the squidgy sand of the seabed started to change into a brittle mass of mussel shells cracking underfoot. A sudden wave of fear and panic rushed up from my legs to my head, and I felt like the very ground might suddenly give way beneath me and swallow me up whole. I turned to look back at the beach again, where there was only one lone dog walker. Had they seen me? Would anyone notice I was gone? I thought of my friend and her fear of having the operation and steadied myself. I would keep walking for her in the hope that my fears would somehow cancel out hers. I finally reached the sea and pushed out the driftwood back out amongst the waves, saying out loud that me, her sister and all her sisters were sending her strength for the day. Then I swiftly turned and headed back to the safety of the dry sands. When I caught up with her a week later, she said the most amazing thing had happened during the operation. She had felt no pain, and all she could see was the blue of the sea.
The Rockpool by Julia. For 2 weeks in the summer my father returned. No books, he came alive in Brittany. On a hot day we found it, a rock pool, deep enough and wide enough to swim in. Its plankton green stillness, eerie and inviting. We clambered down a barnacled slope, Dad goat-like, almost upright, me on a scraped bottom, steadied by scraped hands. He slipped in, laughing off the shock of coldness. Awkward, I joined him. So deep, so cold, no floor, agitation in the ripples. I've got you, he said. Nothing bad would happen while he held me. I listened to the sound of water, calming. I let go.